accelerates hard, pulls away from Lafitte, gains on Senna, and we now almost have a new second place man, but Senna's got the line for Hawthorns and coming out of Westfield.
Almost. To a Formula One driver, almost can be a painful word. In this race, the 1985 European Grand Prix, Marc almost took a famous victory.
And Sura is second. Marc in the Brabham BMW has taken Ayrton Senna in second position. And it's Marc who is second. That's the second of the Brabhams out of the race. The BMW or the turbo has blown, and this is fire extinguisher time, and it's out of the car time for Marc who was second.
Marc almost won that day. He almost made a life-changing move to Ferrari, and he almost lost his life behind the wheel.
I thought I'm dead. I saw the wall coming. I hit the wall straight on because without brakes, and I thought that's it. And I was surprised I'm still alive.
Marc broke his legs twice in crashes during his Formula One career, and later he survived a fiery rally crash in which his co-driver was killed.
I would wish he would have survived. It's hard to live with the situation that your co-driver died.
That Marc survived to tell these tales is almost unbelievable. Welcome to F1 Beyond the Grid with me, Tom Clarkson, and Marc a man with an incredible story. He grew up in Switzerland, where motor racing was banned at the time, but his passion for driving took him to Germany, where his career in motorsport began. As the reigning Formula 2 champion, he was a hot new talent when he arrived in Formula 1. Yet his momentum was cut short almost immediately by a terrifying crash at Kyalami. He fought his way back to fitness, only for another crash to derail his career. And still he raced in Formula 1 again, driving, among others, the Brabham BT54, designed by the genius Gordon Murray. Marc's stories of negotiating with Enzo Ferrari are captivating. His seat fitting at McLaren turns out to be frustrating. His memories of recovering from his injuries are nothing short of amazing. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Marc, it is lovely to have you on the show. Thank you for your time. You've been involved in motorsport for 45 years. Do you love it today as much as you did 45 years ago?
I always think the present time is the best time. And especially because with the bad experience we had in the past with accidents and drivers getting hurt or dying at my time, now it is so safe, and that makes me feel much more relaxed being on the racetrack.
But what about the art of driving a Formula One car? How do you think that's changed in the time that you've been involved?
I think the worst part of it are the simulators. Because before, you came on a new track, you went out and you could see big differences, who learns the track faster than the other one. Now, they all know the track already from the simulator, they know which gear and everything. And I think a lot is gone because of that. And the other thing is, because the analyzers you have now, all these tools, I think a not so talented driver can catch up with the good ones because he can learn from the good ones. He can see exactly how much the steering angle is, where is he braking, and all these, you can copy that. And so I think it helps more a not so talented driver than a talented.
But the real talents are still a step above, aren't they? The Lewis Hamiltons, the Max Verstappens.
This is the good thing. I mean, the talented driver, you can change the regulation as you want. They're always at top. And I think this is, at least, it's forgiving, because I think sometimes drivers are good, which wouldn't be good in the past.
What about the actual art of driving? Because, of course, you had a manual gearbox, and in the mid-80s, it was 1,000 brake horsepower turbo engine. These are very different with the paddle shift. But, of course, there's a lot more going on with buttons on the steering wheel. Do you think a Lewis or a Max would have been a world champion in your day? Do you think the fundamentals of driving are the same?
Yes, the fundamental is the same. It has changed. It was more physical. We had to do a lot more work. We had no power steering. That was the worst, you know. And the other thing, that the shifting was, of course, in a place like Monaco, my hand was open, you know. I had blisters in my hand after the race. But on the other hand, now, because with all the information they have now, they're much more perfect. Because we had sometimes lap times which were 1 lap 1 second slower than the other one because we made a little mistake or we made 2 mistakes. Now they are so perfect. If you look at watch the lap times, so it's different because they're more precise, they're more perfect. We were a bit more wild.
That was the 80s, perhaps. But well, let's talk about your career. You raced in Formula One from 1979 to 1986. When do you think you were at your peak?
My problem was I broke twice the legs in the beginning, and I think that spoiled my career. Because whenever you have an accident, you have to come back and prove you're still as quick. And I was driving for years in pain. If I have to pick a year, I think my best year was 83, when I still had the aspirated arrows. I think that I was one part with the car. And I remember Rosberg once said, in the rain, I only fear one, this is Marc. And that was a big compliment to me. With that car, I was one part. And later with the turbo, the driving was not so nice. You know, you had this turbo lag. You had to put on the throttle when you turned into the corner to have boost at the exit of the corner. And it was a bit strange way of driving. It was not being one part with the car. You had to think in advance what to do.
That 83 season you mentioned, you scored points in 3 of the opening 4 races in that Arrows A6. Confidence must have been high.
Yes. I know. I've just felt where I could play with this car. Yeah, it was for me the maximum you can have. If it's like you're driving, you have 4-wheel on yourself. You know, you're one part of the car. It's a bit like with horses. You know, when you're a show jumper and you're part of the horse, you do well. If not, it's a mess. So it's the same with the cars. Unfortunately,
that 83 season, you scored points in San Marino. That was the 3rd point scoring finish of those opening 4 races. And then it was just a few retirements, and it felt like you lost a bit of momentum for the rest of that season. I remember they changed also the tires. Because of the turbos, they changed the construction of the tires, and suddenly it didn't fit the car anymore. So we lost a lot because of that. Because otherwise, I think I could have continued with that performance. But suddenly the car didn't handle as well because the rear tires made for the turbos were good for traction, but not for the handling of the car. So, of course, I mean, the others had the double horsepower than we had with the aspirator. I can imagine your boss, Jackie Oliver, being so furious about that change in tyre.
Yes. I mean, it really changed everything. And that was a shame because suddenly the handling was not the same anymore.
Now, you did more races for Arrows than any other team. Why do you feel you were such a good fit at that team?
Well, I didn't have many offers from other teams, to be honest. One was from Tolman. I did a test to Tolman, but then I felt, then Jackie came and made a better offer, and so I stayed.
All part of the negotiation.
Yes, right? Yes. Maybe I should have changed. I don't know. It's difficult to say. But it was the lack of offer of other teams. And Arrows didn't know what I can do, and they treated me well. I felt home. It was a family.
It seems to me that throughout your career, you were swimming a little bit against the current. You've talked about the broken legs, and we'll come on to that in a bit. But even as a sport to get involved with, motor racing was banned in Switzerland. So where did this passion for the sport come from? What made you want to do it?
Originally, it was I just loved driving. I was driving whatever I could get. And I remember my father had a Jeep and a car. And in Switzerland, we have the possibility for one number plate for 2 cars. So you pay insurance just for one. In the evening...
Surely that's not the case now, right?
Yes, still is.
Okay.
Yeah, still is. So you leave one car in the garage, and with the other one you can drive. In the evening, when they went out for theater or something, I was stealing the Jeep and went for a drive with the Jeep. And I started very soon to measure the time, going uphill somewhere in the Switzerland mountain, driving up the road. So I just loved driving and loved driving fast. It was something I just had from the beginning. And then a colleague of mine started karting. I had no money, and so I started to work as a mechanic. And as a mechanic, I was also repairing his engines. I was allowed to run in the engine. He didn't like that, to go slow for half an hour, to run in the engine. But after half an hour, you go for it. You check if the engine is good. And one time he took my time and said, "Hey, you're driving faster than me. So the next race you do." That's how I started.
Wow. But then you had to move to Germany.
Exactly. In Switzerland, I paid more or less everything myself in karting. And then to continue, I was lucky. I came to Jim Russell School, and there was a man from Germany who won this course because he filled out questions at the Grand Prix here in
He won
Austria.
a prize.
And he won. So he came here, and he was very impressed about my driving. We had even one day it was raining, and we made a slalom because we could not go on the fast track with the Formula Ford cars. And I beat all the instructors. So he was so impressed, and he invited me to drive his Porsche in Hockenheim for a test. And there I was faster than him. And in the winter he called me and said, I did buy a Formula Phi, which was, like I think you had Formula Ford in England and Formula Volkswagen was in Germany. But you have to prepare yourself. I know you can do that. So that's how I started in Germany. Then the Swiss wouldn't give me a license. They said you have to do some hill climbs first. And what? I said, no, my sponsor will not finance some hill climbs in Switzerland. I have to race in Germany. So I went to Germany. You need to be living in Germany to get a German license. And then I started racing in Germany.
It's a wonderful story of you seizing every opportunity that you were given.
I had to,
Yeah.
because my father was not supporting me. Actually, he threw me out of the house when on a Saturday he wanted to do something, and I said, no, I go karting. And I said, if you have money for this shit, you can also find your own flat. He changed his mind. He changed his mind when I won the championship, but he saw it on television and said, "Oh, this is my son."
Probably very proud. But then you climbed through the junior formulas very quickly. I remember actually seeing you finish second at Thruxton in Formula 2 in 1978. I was there watching from the grandstands, and you were part of the BMW Junior program then. What are your memories of that? And is there a modern day equivalent? Was that the equivalent of the Red Bull program today, the Mercedes Junior program of today?
I would say so. This was the beginning. It was Jochen Nerpasch who invited me into the junior team. I was doing Formula 3 then. And he said, we are looking for young drivers because we have a new model, the new 3 Series, and we should attract young people to buy this car. So we have a junior team. And there was Eddie Cheever, Manfred Winkelhock, and me. That was really good. We had a fitness teacher and everything you can at this time, which was not normal, So he really set up something which now I think in more perfect way Red Bull does. Yeah.
And that's the same Jochen Nerpasch who went on and found Schumacher and Wendlinger and Frentzen as well for Mercedes, the arch rival of BMW.
Exactly. Yeah. When he went to Mercedes, then he did the same thing again, And he found some very famous drivers.
But Marc, you then win the European Formula 2 Championship in '79, and you are the hot shoe, and you are then promoted to Formula 1. You do the last 3 races of that season. How influential were BMW in helping you get into F1?
They couldn't help me. They said, don't do anything while you're still doing Formula 2, because we want to win this championship, which was difficult enough. And then I said, after the last race, you're free to do whatever you want. But there was no help from BMW at this time. And it was actually a journalist who made the contact to Mo Nunn. That was Roger Benoit. He made the contact, and he said, came to me at Donington when I won the championship, and said, next week you can test the ensign. And so that's how it all started.
And your first impressions of Formula 1, I think, were probably quite tough, because it wasn't a great car, let's face it.
Yes. After driving the best Formula 2 car, March was the best at this time, I think. And then sitting in a Formula 1 car, I was surprised how bad the car was. Okay, it was more power, but that was not so impressive. After a few laps, you're already used to it. But then the handling and everything and the grip in the corner was not as good as the Formula 2. So it was quite tough. I think that happens now to all the drivers coming from Formula 2 and winning Formula 2 and coming into Formula 1 in one of the market teams. I think they have the same feeling, that, oh, what a shit, after driving such a good car.
Life can be very expensive. Many of us have probably been in a situation where you've been thrown a curveball and an unexpected expense lands in your lap, leaving you wondering how you're going to pay for it. Whether it's house repairs, holidays, a wedding, or just wanting to treat a loved one to a special experience. Dave can help you take some of that financial anxiety off the table when you need it most. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. There's no interest and no credit check needed, and the app is incredibly simple to use, leaving you with the headspace and the money to finally tackle those expenses that have been causing you stress without any hang-ups. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's Dave, D-A-V-E. Sign up for an extra cash amount and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you will thank you. Marc, I guess those late 70s did give you a wonderful opportunity to work with some brilliant engineers. Robin Herd at March in the F2 program, and he was obviously involved in the F1 program at March as well. And then even Mo Nunn at Ensign wasn't a great car, but he was a legendary engineer. And I remember Alex Zanardi on this podcast telling me that he owes his career really to Mo Nunn and how much he enjoyed working with Mo.
Yeah. You mentioned Robin Herd. Robin Herd, I was the test driver for the program for the wing car, the first Formula 2 wing car March built. And I was testing all winter. I spent all my time in Oxford and being always ready to go if the weather was nice for testing.
I'm guessing you didn't get much running then.
Yeah, we went to all the tracks, to Snetterton and all these tracks which were available. So I learned a lot about these wing cars. And later Mo Nunn. Mo Nunn was, for me, the best engineer because he came just down to the point. What is your feeling? And I said, the car is doing this and this and this and this. And said, maybe you need a stiffer roll bar. Come on, it must be, you have to change everything. But he was really good to find out, listen to me, what he has to do on the car. The problem was when I was driving for him, they had no money. And we had a race-to-race deal, I tried to find sponsorship, and I remember one time I found 50,000, which was just enough to get the Cosworth engine out of the rebuild to buy the engine out. I mean, this was very tough, and that's a shame because I could have done a lot more with Monan, and but there was no money around.
What was it like for a young driver coming in to Formula One at the end of '79? And what were the establishment like with you? The Schechters, the Villeneuves, the Arnauds, were they friendly? What was the atmosphere like in the paddock back then?
I think it was more colleagues than they are now, because there was something which kept us together, was the danger. Yeah, there was a lot of talking at this time about the safety, which was really not because we had these wing cars and the weak alu chassis. I mean, it was just you had a corner speed nearly as high as now, because we had I think Frank Durney once told me we had 4.5 G as well in the corners with aluminium chassis, bending, and I remember sometimes the steering locked, like because it was too much force, and you could feel it on the steering because it bending everything on the car. So safety was something we always discussed and kept us together.
I'm just thinking of that bending aluminium chassis. I mean, it sounds absolutely bonkers. What was your attitude to the danger?
When I started in Formula One, I broke my legs twice in an accident in Kyalami. Once was a brake failure, and the other one was rear suspension broke, because also my fault, because we felt with harder springs the car was better traction, which was a bit strange, but things like that happen. And they said, okay, do we have even harder springs? They said, yeah, but it's a big step harder. Dave was the engineer. And I said, okay, let's try it. But then the suspension collapsed because it was too hard for the suspension. So the rocker arm broke, and I went off and broke my legs again. So, yeah, it was the technique was not so perfect as now. I mean, now it's a big surprise if a suspension breaks. At this time, it was quite often.
About those leg-breaking crashes at Kyalami, first of all, was it the same corner both times, in both 1980 and 82?
No, it was two corners separate. But it was, nearly not far away.
But look, how tough was the recuperation after the first one? Let's talk 1980. It's your first full season of Formula One. Third race of the season, I think it was. You have this crash. How much of a setback was it, and how tough was it to get yourself back in the cockpit?
The first crash was, I thought I'm dead. I saw the wall coming. I hit the wall straight on, because without brakes, and I thought, that's it. And I was surprised I'm still alive. And then, of course, you go to hospital, you feel sorry for yourself, and then you want to come back. You want to come back and prove you're still fit and strong enough to do it. After the second accident, it was worse, because I knew exactly what's coming now, with the operation, with the training again in the gym to get fit again, pain while walking or braking in the car. You have to drive with painkillers again, and the second time was much harder.
The first crash, how long were you in hospital in South Africa? When could you come back to Europe?
The people in South Africa, that was very, very hard. They said, we cannot operate these legs. The braking is too complicated.
What were they suggesting then?
Sending me to Switzerland, because they had some sort of meeting with doctors, and they showed the latest, what they can do, how to put a broken ankle together. And there was a Swiss who showed a new technique with metal and everything, so no plaster, just with metal bolting everything together. At this time there was a big step forward, and they said, we know a doctor in Switzerland who can do it. It was by luck Switzerland, And so after, I think I was there for 4 or 5 days, maybe 1 week, and then they sent me back to Switzerland in the plane. I needed six seats lying down in the... So I was happy to go back to Switzerland, but of course the shock when they say we cannot do it is too complicated. You will not be able to walk the rest of your life if we do it.
How did those two crashes affect your speed in the car?
The problem was I lost some movement in my legs. And because of that, I was not so quick going from the throttle to the brakes. And I was insecure. On a bumpy track, you come with 300 to the corner, and you have to be sure you get the brake pedal. At this time, we were braking with the right foot, because we had the clutch as well. We had 3 pedals. So to go from flat on the throttle to the brakes, it took more time than for other people. And I think that's where I lost a little bit. Later, I learned that you can change gears down with a Hewland gearbox or with a Formula 1 gearbox, also without using the clutch. If you blissed with the revs in the right moment, and I started to brake on the left foot. I learned that in rallying.
So you must have been one of the first left foot brakers in Formula 1.
Yes, I was for sure. And I didn't tell nobody because I was afraid if I ever break a gearbox, they will say it's because you're braking with the left foot and you don't use the clutch.
I'd love to know when they were rebuilding a gearbox from Marc Sure's cars, whether once you started left foot braking, what were the cogs like? Were they more worn and, you know?
I haven't never heard anything about that, and I never had a broken gearbox, to be honest. So it makes me confident. But I did it with my road car. I mean, a synchronized gearbox, it was a disaster to do it. But with the straight gears, it's just cluck, it goes in. It was actually much easier than I thought. But that made me confident again. When I had this hesitating, from the throttle to the brakes. Yeah.
The second crash in '82 took place during pre-season testing, and you just joined Arrows. How did that crash affect your relationship with the team, with Jackie Oliver?
Because finally they came to the hospital and said, the rocker arm broke, which was very important because before with Günther Schmidt with the ATS, with the first crash, they never confirmed that we had a brake problem. Even I came to the pit and said I have a long pedal, and they said, can you go and do one time with soft tires, because so we are qualified, because there was Friday qualifying and Saturday, and if it rains on Saturday you cannot qualify. So they sent me out with a brake problem, and then with the soft tires the problem was worse because it was more G-force. Anyway, Arrows was straight. They said, yeah, we've seen the problem, I'm sorry, that was the rocker arm broke. And so we was never a problem with them.
So psychologically, that's good for you as well.
Very good for me, yeah. And also, because they didn't do very well when I was in hospital, they were fighting to qualify the car. I came out of hospital and qualified it the first time back in the car. And so...
Not only that, Marc, you finished 7th.
Yes.
It was the Belgian Grand Prix.
You know that, yeah. It was a terrible Grand Prix because Villeneuve died. I remember that. And I remember also when I got out in the Parc Fermé, I could not walk anymore. And so I was standing there and talking to people, and I was waiting for people to disappear so I can limp back to the paddock.
What was the sense of satisfaction that you felt to get back in the car and finish 7th? Or was everything overshadowed by what had happened the day before with Gilles Villeneuve's death?
It's a shock, and then, of course, we are all egoists, First is your problem, is the biggest problem, is not what the other have. So, yeah, in a moment it was a shock, but the next day is your race, and that's it.
Were you ever in the running to replace Villeneuve at Ferrari?
Yes, I was.
I think Enzo Ferrari would have admired your heroics that day.
Yeah.
At Zolder.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. After Zolder, Daniele Audetto, which was a race director at Ferrari before, and he was working with us for an Italian sponsor, so he was with Arrows. He came to me and said, Enzo called me and I can get you a drive at Ferrari. You want to do that? I said, yes, but I have a contract with Arrows. And then he said, I want half of your money.
What's up?
That was Daniele Audetto. I want half of your money if I can make this deal. And I said, well, the money I'm having from my private sponsor now, yes, from everything. I said, okay, I maybe never get such a chance anymore. So we went to Jackie Oliver, and they were discussing it, and they said, at this time we had, I think, Avon tires, and Ferrari had Goodyear tires. And he said, when Ferrari can organize us Goodyear tires, we will let Marc go. And the answer from Enzo was, you don't make any deals with me. That was my chance with Ferrari, was gone.
Did you ever actually get to speak to Enzo himself?
No, it was via Daniele, yeah.
Did I read that the previous year there maybe was an opportunity with McLaren as well?
Yes. Actually, it was before the race. I was driving for Theodore at this time, very unhappy. And Ron Dennis called me and said, it was before the Austrian Grand Prix. Ron Dennis called me and said, maybe we can get you into our car, but it has to be very secret because it's a very political thing to get rid of the accessories. One evening at 8 o'clock, I went to the factory. There was Ron Dennis and 2 mechanics. That's it. And we made a seat. That was in the week before the Austrian Grand Prix. And I went very excited to Austria. Then Ron called me just the day before first practice. Called me, sorry, we did not manage to get rid of the accessories because, the connection with Marlboro, and they will cut the Marlboro money if we do something like that, or a part of the Marlboro money, whatever. So I had to go back in the Theodore.
God, it's funny how careers can get so close and yet so far.
Yes, it could have been so much difference, yeah.
Let Babbel help you speak confidently in a new language in as little as just 15-minute daily lessons. There are 14 different languages to choose from, including German, French, Spanish, and Italian. And it's available as an app or online, so you can log on and take a lesson whenever and wherever you want to, and your progress will be synced across all of your devices, giving you the freedom to learn on your own schedule and at a pace that suits you. Babbel is filled with great tools like their speech recognition technology, which can even help you improve your accent and pronunciation. And conversation flows naturally with Babbel because they design their courses with real-world conversations in mind, focusing on useful vocabulary so you're learning things you'll actually use in everyday life. That's because their interactive lessons aren't just robots talking. They're created by more than 150 language experts and voiced by native speakers using a modern conversation-based method. In addition to lessons, you can also access podcasts, games, videos, or even join live classes with a language teacher. Right now, Babbel is offering our listeners 6 months free with a purchase of a 6-month subscription with the promo code GRID. Go to babbel.com/play and use the promo code GRID for an extra 6 months free. That's Babbel, BABBEL.com/play, promo code GRID. Babbel, language learning that works. Marc, let's talk about what I think is your best opportunity in Formula One. It came with Brabham in '85. You finished 4th at Monza that year. You looked set for a podium at Brands Hatch in the European Grand Prix until I think it was your turbo let go very late in the race. How do you reflect on that '85 season?
First of all, I was not ready because I didn't have a drive in the beginning of the season. And I started to work as a commentator. But I did long distance racing with Porsche Kramer. So I had a job and I was working on my rally program, which was my love. But of course, I always felt, it's not fair that I never had a chance to drive one of these cars. Twice I was very close to get a drive. And I remember Bernie said to me at Monaco, I think it was, you don't want to drive anymore? And I says, yes, I want to drive. I still have something open, I still have the bill open, we say. Yeah. And some time after, I got a call from Herbie Blash, and he said, you can drive the next race. Without testing, without anything. It was this Spa race which was cancelled because the asphalt broke up. So without anything, after half year not driving a Formula One car, or more than half year, I was not really good prepared when I came to Brabham.
But did you even think about saying no, or did you say yes immediately to Herbie?
Yes, I said yes, and then said, okay, I give you to Bernie, and then we talked about not even how money or anything. I just, you want to do it? Yes, I want to do it, but this is my chance.
But you're a racing driver. Are you telling me you didn't talk about money before getting in the car?
No, I just wanted to drive. Maybe this is one of my mistakes, because I love driving. And I think that's why I was able to drive so many years for let's say, second-class teams, with Theodore, with Ensign, with also Arrows at some stages was not really a good car. It was because I just loved driving. I wanted to do that.
How good then was the BT54?
For me, with the Pirelli tires, it was a beast. And I think François Henault, who had to drive until mid-season, he spun on the straight with this car. And Bernie said to him, you better give up racing before you kill yourself. Even he brought some sponsorship into the team, and Bernie was really worried about him. And I was able to drive the car, I was able to cope with these problems, but it took me a while to feel well. The other thing was, the chassis I got was weak. You could not feel any changes on the car. And the problem was, you have a race-to-race pace. Because suddenly, I was testing at Silverstone one day, and then Herbie came and said, sorry, tomorrow Emanuele Pirro will test the car. So, because I think Olivetti made pressure to have an Italian driver, or I don't know. And
they were the main sponsor, weren't they? Yeah.
Yes. So suddenly, and if he told me before, I would go for a time. But it was testing, and next day, what are we doing tomorrow? Sorry, tomorrow Emanuele Pirro is driving. I haven't done a good time, but Pirro didn't beat my time, so it was even without trying. So that was good. So I stayed in the car. But with that, to come and say something wrong with this chassis, I want a new chassis. No. I talked with Gordon Murray about it and explained him what the chassis is doing. And I said, yeah, maybe we will have a new chassis for Nelson and you can have his spare car. This spare car I got in Brands Hatch. And from then on, I was there. In Monza, I finished fourth. I should have finished third. I had so tire vibration, I couldn't read the bit board. So I had fuel for one lap more. I saved fuel for one lap more. I could have overtaken him because I had enough fuel to overtake Senna. But then the flag came, and I thought this one more lap. In Adelaide, I was fighting with Lauda and Prost for third position. So yeah, after I changed the chassis, I was there. And for me, it was very good for myself. I could show I can do it. Even with the bad luck, I never finished in one of these positions.
Tell us a little bit more about working with the design genius, Gordon Murray.
I have a nice story. One time, I think it was Zandvoort, where Nelson and I both were not happy with the car. And, we sometimes get out of the car and you say, how is your car? You have this problem as well? And so, yeah, and we have to speak to Gordon about it. Something is wrong here, yeah? Where is Gordon? And we went to the motorhome. He was not there. We went to the truck. He was sitting in the back of the truck reading a book, How to Be a Musician.
Of course, he was.
But he was
passionate.
A genius. He was a genius.
Yeah.
He could. I think because he had some distance to all of that. he could make the right decisions. He knew exactly what's going on, but it was a strange way doing it.
Yeah. Did you feel that Brabham was a one-car team, really?
Oh yes, it was. I remember we went to Detroit. I did some testing for Pirelli in the first session. I had some tires I should try. I decided these are the tires, and they had 3 sets, or 5 sets, I don't know, but limited. And I said, "Oh, this is the tire I want. I feel very well with these tires." And I was faster than Nelson. Nelson came. What tires did he have? I want these tires, but not the same. All. So I had to drive.
And he got them.
Yeah, he got them. Yeah, yeah. That was.
That's
yeah.
tough,
It was a
isn't
one-man team, but correct, because I have to say, Nelson was the first driver which could go out and give me 1 second in the first time lap, for in qualifying, for example. I improved in the second run, but he went out and did this time, which was 2 seconds. We had the qualifying tires at this time. Was 2 seconds faster than we did in the free practice. And he just went out and did it. And I maybe improved by 1 second, and then the next run I improved a bit more. But he just could go out and get everything out of the car, out of the tires. I had to say, this is the first time I met somebody who just can drive faster than me. I have to admit that. And so he deserved it, that he was the number one.
Was there ever a discussion about staying with the team for 86?
I think the pressure from Olivetti made the decision very clear. There were 2 Italians after that, you know. I think I had the feeling before when Piero was in discussion that after losing Piquet the year after, you know, then they had to take Italian to keep Olivetti happy.
Marc, can I take you back to a question I asked you very near the start of this chat, which was, when were you at your peak? I think there's a strong argument to say that you were at your peak in 85. The end of 85 when you got Piquet's old chassis.
Yes, I was, as I said, in 83. I felt one with my car. And then I had some, with the turbo, which was, was a strange driving. I could drive the car. I had no problem with the power. I could handle that.
What was it like to drive 1,000 brake horsepower BMW brutal turbo?
You can imagine that up to 4th gear, you had wheel spin. So when you got on the straight and put the 5th gear, was the first time you really could floor it. And it went. And then you put 6th gear, and that was the end of the straight. The straight was never long enough. that was the feeling you had. So it's always to put the power down, because it came, at the BMW, it came all together.
So was there quite a bit of lag, and then suddenly...
Yes, lag, and then you had too much. So for example, getting out of the corner, you had to accelerate to build up boost. And when it came, you had to go back with the throttle, otherwise you spin out of the corner, or you had wheel spin. So it was like feeding at the right moment, putting the foot down to fill up the turbo. But when the turbo boost came, you had to lift off, because otherwise you had wheel spin and destroy the rear tires immediately. But it was the most impressive thing. And Paul Rocher once said, when I was driving at Brabham, which we were allowed to just close the wastegate, just turn it, and he said we had 1,430 horsepower in this lap, but it only went for 1 lap.
Well, and then it would go bang.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and they put which we called a kilobrom, we called it a chip in, which gave him more fuel, so to cool the piston with fuel. So it was always a black smoke coming out like an airplane,
So which racetracks did you experience that 1,400 brake horsepower? Can you remember? Is there one lap?
Le Castellet, I remember, because we had on sea level. On sea level, you have the full power. Kyalami, I remember as well. It was like, finally I have a straight which I can use the power. That was really impressive. But at the end of the straight, you have to brake 200 meters with such a speed, But it was nice, the acceleration when you really could put fifth gear and go for it. There's like you take off. It was like, now next step is take off.
But the one thing those performances in late 85 did for you is you were back, in the market, and Jackie Oliver came knocking again, didn't he?
Yes, they wanted me back. And also because of the sponsor. The sponsor has always had very big influence. It was this Barclay cigarette, which was mainly in Belgium and Switzerland. So for the market, having Gerhard Berger, which came in via BMW, he was not the right man for them, and Berger got another offer, and then suddenly one seat was free again.
So despite not being able to do any of your early racing in Switzerland, you were very much a Swiss driver when it came to sponsorship.
Yeah, but I mean, in the beginning, I was trying to find sponsorship all the time. I had a secretary which did nothing else than just, get in contact with some possible sponsors. And some races with Ensign, we had for race-to-race sponsors, for somebody gave 50,000, one gave 100,000. Now you would put a zero more. But anyway, it was money, and it was just for the running cost, it was enough. Yeah. And all ended when Barclay came and said, we have a new cigarette. Is the test market will be Switzerland and Belgium. And we would love to do that with you in Formula One. And from this moment on, I had no more sponsorship problems. The first time, but it took a long time until I got rid of the problem with the sponsor.
And does it make you a better racing driver not having that nagging doubt about money in the back of your mind?
Yes, definitely. Because when you're always worried about can you do the next race, or do they have to take another driver which brings money? This worries you. It doesn't make you free because you cannot plan. You try to give your best, and will I do the next race? This is hard. Yeah.
Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. What if we put as much effort into looking after our minds as we do our cars, our houses, or even our personal belongings? Taking the time to invest in yourself and nurture a happy, healthy mindset is one of the best things you can do to take care of yourself, because our mental health and well-being is just as important as our physical health, and it's remarkable what a difference it can have on our lives and how we view the world. I'm a big believer that talking through your problems is one of the most important things you can do to help tackle them head on. There's no need to suffer in silence. It can really help you gain some perspective on things that might be troubling you when you get them out in the open. With BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy and offers video, phone, and even live chat-only therapy, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. The important thing is that you feel comfortable and that you have a safe space to talk about whatever might be causing you stress. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/grid. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/grid. You mentioned a little bit earlier rallying and saying how passionate you were about it. When did you start rallying?
I think it was 84. I had a request from an organizer of the Gotthard Rally, a Swiss rally. And he said, would you drive, we have a car, a Renault 5 Turbo for you, would you like to drive that? I said, I always wanted to do a rally. So I did. And I was leading the rally. My very first rally, I was leading Swiss Championship, okay, but still, I love that. I love that driving on gravel and on all these things. I did actually best times on gravel, which was a surprise for me, because on asphalt you expect it from me, but no, because I enjoyed so much. I always loved to drive on snow. It was a passion. Sometimes when it was snowing in Switzerland, I went out in the night to drive on snowy roads.
And is that why you were so good in the wet on a racetrack?
Yes. To drive a car on slippery ground, you tell the car to slide, and not the car is sliding away from you. In the dry, it's the opposite. In the dry, you don't want to slide, and when it slides away, it's a mistake. But if you're on a slippery ground, or on snow, or in the rain, you tell the car to slide. You decide how much it slides. You have to be active to do that. And I love that.
Did the rallying affect your racing in a negative way at all?
I don't think so. In rally, you learn to cope with all the conditions. For example, when the tires go off, or in rally is, for example, sometimes you have gravel tires and you get on asphalt, so you cannot destroy the gravel tires. So you learn a lot for the art of driving. Not to go over the limit. In Formula 1, you always go to the limit. But of course, there are situations where the tire go off, and then you should take care of it. And in rallying, it's much more extreme. You have tire go off, or driving with snow tires on asphalt when there's no more snow. Is horrible, and you learn to cope with this situation. So I think it helps in Formula 1.
David Richards came on the podcast and he said that the most gifted driver he's had on his books at ProDrive /BAR and Benetton as well. And so from a Formula 1 point of view, Jacques Villeneuve, Jenson Button, Colin McRae in the rally, he said the most talented driver he's had on his books, Sebastian Loeb.
Can imagine. Yeah.
Can you imagine that though, having done both?
Yeah.
Do you think someone like Loeb, if he'd had the right opportunities at the right time in his life, could he have succeeded in Formula 1?
Yes, I think he could. But of course, the problem is in rally, normally they are too old already when they go in the high level of rallying. They're already too old to. I think if one of these rally drivers in young years, they do all sorts of racing. They do karting, they do Formula 3 or whatever. The rally drivers, they know about these things. But of course, their big talent they can show in rallying. And in rallying, this is something you have to say. The driver is more important than in road racing.
Particularly in the Group B era of the mid-'80s, right? Those cars were nuts.
Yes, they were beasts. They were beasts. It was true. And
sorry to interrupt, but I'm just imagining you for a second driving an RS200 one weekend and then having a BMW Turbo in Formula 1 the next weekend with 1400 brake horsepower. What an extraordinary period you lived through then.
Yes, both were extreme cars. That's true. The rally car was not really nice to drive compared to the Renault I was driving before, because it was four-wheel drive, but no power steering, and it was hard work to drive this rally car. And the Formula 1 was a complete different from the power, because you always had the problem to put the power down in the Formula 1 car, and in the rally car you had four-wheel drive suddenly, and which was really nice to drive, in traction. But of course you need a different style for the corners. We had not this clever differentials they have now. So you had to fix. There was fixed front rear. You could have 75% at the rear and 25% at the front, or 50-50. So it was difficult to get the corners right.
And when I think of you in rallying, you obviously can't get far away from the Hessen Rally in '86 and that terrifying crash which brought your career to an end. How do you reflect on that even now?
It was a European Championship race rally, and I was fighting with Michel Mouton. She was driving a Peugeot. So we were on the same level. She was a bit quicker on gravel, and I was quicker on asphalt. So the lead changed between us all the time. And then we had this special stage, which was only asphalt, very fast, which was my stage. After, I think in the first lap, I took seconds off her. So it was clear when I think we had to do 3 laps on called Schottenring. which was an old race circuit, I learned later on, I touched something, a curb. I learned later because the spectators wrote to me. And then there were 2 left-hander, a long straight, and a nearly flat right-hander. And when I arrived there, the rear end went. So I had a puncture. And I lost it. And I went into the trees, and the car was in 2 pieces. I remember for one moment, I felt very hot, and I see grass in front of me. And I said, I have to go there. And I opened the seat belt and wanted to go, but I couldn't because everything was broken. The pelvis, everything was smashed, the legs, both legs. But I rolled myself forward. And the marshal, who came running, he pulled me away. I was burning because I was full of fuel, because the tree just hit the fuel tank, which was between the seat and the engine. And so that's why the car exploded. And he pulled me into a little river. And then he went back to try to save my co-pilot, but I think he died from the impact. I would wish he would have survived. It's hard to live with the situation that your co-driver died, because it's your fault anyway. You were the driver. Even the tree hit on my side, so it hit me more than him. But I remember in hospital when I woke up after 3 weeks in coma, I asked, where is Michel? Why is he not coming? I had the feeling the tree hit my side, so he must be okay. And they didn't tell me in the beginning. And weeks later they said, he died in the accident. It's really hard. But and you're in this situation, you're hurt, you're in hospital. You're not very strong mentally, to have this message as well. So they were right not to tell me immediately.
Even 35 years later, it's very tough to hear you talk about that.
It helped me to talk about. For me, it was first I had to find out what happened. And Pirelli confirmed the left rear tire was damaged. So it was true what a spectator write to me. They said, I think you touched the curb there three corners before. And it was important. It was not a stupid driver mistake. I went off because of a puncture, even if I made the puncture. But in rallying, I think it's quite normal, that these things happened all the time. That was very important. And the other thing, you need time to get over it. But talking about it did help me. I think if you eat it, everything, and you have the burden, you kill the person, I think is better if you talk about it.
And your own physical injuries, how long did it take for the pelvis to mend and everything else, the legs? Did you know that your driving career was over at that point?
Yes, because it took 1 year. Before it was always 4 months when I broke the legs. So in 4 months, you just start already with the exercise, with the part of the body which is still okay. But now the body was smashed. I had 14 broken bones. It was broken from the shoulder down to the legs, and everything was smashed. And the burns from the fire, they hurt the most. My neck was burned. It was burned between the helmet. I didn't lose the helmet, luckily. But between the helmet and the overall, this part was burned.
Were you wearing a balaclava?
Yes, but obviously it's not good enough to save you from the fire. And because I was full of fuel, my overall was burning itself. And the one glove I lost halfway. It was hanging on the finger. You can see in my hand how it's burned. And the thumb was just together shrimping, So they had to cut out the thumb again and open it up and put some material from my hips to put it in and to make my hand working again. So that was very hurtful. But the other thing is just, when you have so much time to think, suddenly a sunset is something fantastic. You see the sunset. I remember when I see the first time my horse. I went with sticks to my horse and I sat on my horse. It was like I'm back in this world. And then suddenly motorsport was not so important anymore.
Animals are great therapy, aren't they?
Oh, yes, yes. I remember my mother in the hospital I was in Germany. She hung up a photo of my horse in the intensive care room, which you normally should not do, but she did. She said it's important for him when he wakes up and he can see his horse. That was my mother. And she helped me because they wanted to take off one leg because it was so badly hurt and they were worried I would die on it. And she said, no, I take the risk. And she had to sign not to take off the leg, and I'm thankful for her. Whatever. This is a decision a mother would do everything to save my life, but she knew me, and she said he will not want to be alive if one leg is missing.
Marc, you as a driver, everything you've said in the last hour, you were clearly very versatile, racing in sports cars, touring cars, rallying, Formula One. In what type of car were you happiest?
I come back to 83. The aspirated Formula One car was my favorite toy. I felt I could do everything with it. And I think the result proved I could fight with the best with this car. And of course, the rallying was something I just loved, you know. I love to drive on gravel, which is probably strange for a Formula One driver, but I never really was so keen with the sports car. I did the Porsche 962.
Such an iconic car.
Yes, but I never felt one part with it. And I drove also the Ford C100. These cars I never felt really involved. Also because you share the car with somebody. You know, you get out and the next one in is not
you
your
don't like
car. It's not. Yeah. So,
although you did share the sports car quite a lot with Manfred Winkelhock, didn't you?
Yes,
Who was
yes.
an old friend from the BMW Junior program.
Yes, exactly. We were.
That must have been fun.
It was my real friend in Formula One or in motorsport. A real friend. We met outside racing a lot, and we did a lot of funny things together. So he was a real friend. And yes, it was good. To drive with him was always fantastic. Yeah, we shared a lot of touring car races. We won together touring car races, and also then the sports car.
Well, let's end this chat. It's been a wonderful chat, Marc. Thank you so much. Just bringing it right up to date. You're still very much involved in Formula One, working for Swiss TV. But I want you to imagine you have your own team and you can employ two of the drivers on the current grid. Who impresses you the most right now?
You have to say Max Verstappen. I think at the moment he is the fastest driver in the field. He gets it to the point. In the past he made sometimes mistakes. Now he is nearly perfect.
Do you think he's a better driver now for winning the championship last year?
Yes, definitely. Because I think the pressure is gone. He knows how to do it. I think George Russell is the second driver I would choose. I'm between Norris and Russell, but I think Norris improved every year. But Russell impressed already in his first year when he was driving the Williams. He had this extra. Now he can prove it with unlucky. The Mercedes is not winning, but if he would, I mean, he won races already. And I don't forget he is tall and more heavy than other drivers. I think he drives with a little disadvantage, and still, he is fantastic.
Okay, so it's Max and George. I'm interested to hear that it's not Charles Leclerc, and it's not Lewis Hamilton in the car alongside Max Verstappen.
When you employ a Max Verstappen, you want a young driver next to him, and not an old driver next to him. I always find this combination quite boring if you have two established driver. And for me, Leclerc is already an established driver. He has won races before, and so I would take a young one to give pressure to Max.
What a wonderful way to end. Marc, thank you very much for your time. Wonderful to catch up.
Thank you.
I was hanging off Marc's every word. What an incredible man. He showed so much determination, bravery and focus when at times he must have felt the world was against him. He's another driver who had the talent to get to the very top of Formula One, but luck played against him. Every time I see him walking, albeit with a slight limp, around the Formula One paddocks of today, I know after this conversation how lucky we are to see him at all. Marc, many thanks for your time. It was wonderful to chat, and see you at the next race. Now, as ever, please remember to send in your thoughts and stories about Marc. Do you remember his races? Do you listen to him on Swiss TV today? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll read out some of your messages at the end of next week's show. Which, of course, brings me on to what you sent in about Jody Egginton after last week. Let's start with this from Gerben Bakker. Jody is what you call a waterfall of information. Need a bit of time to catch my breath now, so I can start to digest all I've heard. I know what you mean, Gerben. Jody speaks quickly and loads up his sentences with information. I loved listening to him and breaking down what he said. Next, let's hear from John Edwards. A fascinating podcast with Jody Egginton, he says. The drivers rightly spray the champagne, but the engineers are the real magicians who make these cars so breathtaking to watch. Amazing listen from a guy who's seen and done it all. Thank you. Well, thanks for the note, John. And you're right, the engineers are the secret stars of our sport, aren't they? It was great to hear from one of the less high-profile technical directors as well, because it proved just how much strength and depth there is in Formula One. And finally, hear this from Gumption. As a young New York inner-city kid back in the 90s, I remember always wanting to become an engineer in Formula One, but had absolutely no idea how to even attempt to go about it. I didn't even know of anyone beside myself who watched Formula One. Fast forward to this podcast, and I'm glad Jody spent some time outlining the path for today's young, aspiring F1 engineers. I would have run with this had someone shared this insight back in my day. What a great message. Thank you, Gumption. Let's hope that some young, aspiring engineers have taken on board what Jody said and are indeed running with it. Now, we'll leave it there for this week, but thanks to everyone who wrote in. I read all of your messages. If you have a moment, please leave us a rating and a review on your podcast app. We love reading your comments, and it helps other F1 fans find out about the show. And if you need something to listen to next, how about the latest episode of F1 Nation? Damon Hill, Gerhard Berger and I pick our star performers of the season so far and look ahead to the French Grand Prix. Just search for F1 Nation. Thanks so much for listening. F1 Beyond the Grid is produced by F1 and Audioboom Studios. Until next time, keep it flat out.